hit it.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori La Bey, and I'm so excited that you're joining us today. We are going to have a fascinating conversation as usual as we learn from people all around the world at all ages and stages of life. Stay tuned as we shift our dementia care from crisis to comfort.
All right, here we go. What you think about, you will bring about some mental change. We will
Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host, Lori La Bey, and I'm thrilled that you're joining us today. We're going to be having a great conversation with Dr. Therese Zink and her new book called The COVID Chronicles, How Essential Workers Cope. And I think this is such a very, very important topic. But as usual, I'm going to give a couple of shout-outs before I introduce you to Dr. Zink and we get on with our conversation. This is a live show, so if you're listening and you want to call in and join the conversation, you can do that by calling 323-870-4602. That's 323-870-4602. Now, if you liked our opening music, it was called Clarion Call by the Mark Arneson Band, and I will be forever grateful that they allow us to use that song for our opening. It's just one of those things that just is upbeat and always fills me. So you can download that on any of your favorite music platforms if you'd like. For those of you that are new to our show, Alzheimer Speaks Radio was created so we talk about sound information, not just sound bites. Our goal is to raise all voices all around the world at all ages and stages. So maybe, just maybe, you can be our next guest. If you're living with dementia, if you're caring for somebody personally or professionally, maybe you're a researcher, maybe you're a Girl Scout or a Boy Scout that's got a cool project going on, everyone is welcome here. So reach out to me at radio@alzheimerspeaks.com, and we will take it from there. Now, I always like to give a shout out to a few organizations, and I just did a show on Tuesday. Actually, it was on Wednesday, and it was about Maud's Ventures, and I absolutely love this organization. They have 3 challenges where they're going to give seed money of $50,000 to $100,000 to people. 1 is for adaptive clothing, 2 is regarding aphasia, and the 3rd one is regarding respite care. So check out Maud's Ventures to learn more about that, or go back and to our archives and you can listen to that interview. They are just really a very cool organization. They're willing to answer and any of your questions that you might have, and applications are very simple. I also want to give a shout out to Lorenzo's House. They are doing Lorenzo's Camp, which is for youth that have a parent or guardian who is diagnosed with younger onset Alzheimer's disease. And that's going to be a virtual camp Monday, June 21st from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And that is Central Time. And again, you can just reach out to us for more information regarding that. I also want to give a shout out to a couple of organizations I'm going to be speaking at. One is out in Delaware, and they are having a wonderful virtual event that they are doing that is absolutely fantastic, and it's free. They've got lots and lots of great speakers that you can tap into, which is always amazing in and of itself. And so you can go to either our blog or our homepage at alzheimerspeaks.com and learn more. But it's the virtual Delaware Aging Expo, May 25th to the 26th. And that'll be from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And, register now. It is free. And the other one that I want to tell you about is another public event I'm doing is called Together for Dementia. And it is the 2021 Dementia Global Challenge. And that is through the Brace organization. And again, you can go to our site and find out more information regarding that. But they've got some wonderful, wonderful speakers lined up. Next, I'm just going to give a couple of shout-outs and reminders. Coro Health is still allowing people to download their apps for free during COVID. I don't know how much longer this is going to last, but take advantage of it. You can get both their Music First and Coro Faith for free. And just go to Coro Health, CORO Health.com. And then the memory cafes are starting to come online. And so you can find out more information about those at the Memory Cafe directory. And, of course, I would be amiss if I didn't give a shout-out to our new global resource directory called Dementia Map, which is free access to all for everything dementia. It's kind of your roadmap to care. And you can visit dementiamap.com for more information there. We are going to hear from the footbar walker, and then we're going to have an exciting conversation with Dr. Zink.
Introducing the life-changing footbar walker.
I'm Peggy from Danville, Kentucky, and I'm 91 years old. The footbar walker revolutionized my care of George. The saving that I made from having to put him in a nursing home came to about $192,000. The footbar walker opens and closes just like a standard walker. The only thing that is different is the top bar and the foot bar. Does that ever make a difference?
Does someone you love use a walker? Do they struggle to get up from a seated position? Are you a caregiver dealing with physical pain and stress as you help your patient? The footbar walker was designed to assist not only the patient, but also the caregiver. Patients have more control standing up, and no lifting from the caregiver is required. See how it works at thefootbarwalker.com. That's thefootbarwalker.com. Peggy, would you recommend the footbar walker?
Do I ever? I would not be in the health that I'm in today at this age had it not been for the footbar walker.
I absolutely love that walker. It is really powerful at reducing falls and injuries to both the care partner and the person who needs that mobility tool. So check out the footbar walker, please. Now, I'm so excited to introduce you to not only a wonderful physician, but to a personal friend of mine who happens to be a family physician with 30 years of experience. And that includes not only caring for patients, but teaching, doing research, and administration. So she just has this wide brush that she has used in her career, and she's filled with knowledge. I was lucky enough to meet her through a blogging class back in, I want to say it was 2010, and we've stayed in contact ever since. In fact, she was the one that introduced me to the wonderful Hollywood film called His Neighbor Phil, which is now a timeless love, which I had the opportunity to help them with their marketing plan and become a sponsored, a platinum sponsor, and have shown that film all over the country, and I can't wait to get back to doing that. So I can't thank her enough, because that film is absolutely amazing, and it has pulled so many communities and individuals together by doing our screenings and talkbacks. I have personally always valued her friendship and the amazing work that she does. She has this humanitarian spirit, which all I can really tell you is wow. She is just one deep, kind soul. Dr. Zink is currently a professor at Brown University in Rhode Island, and she's also the recipient of the U.S. Fulbright Scholar Award. And during COVID, she had her foot in two worlds. One, caring for her patients and advocating also for her sister and mother in long-term care. And so today we are going to discuss her new book called COVID Chronicles, How Essential Workers Cope, which I know you're going to find as fascinating as I did. So welcome. Is it okay if I call you Therese instead of Dr.
Please.
Zink? Okay,
Please do.
I like you said, I am so excited to have you on the show. I just I've adored you from the moment we met, and your work in this world has been incredible. And this is such an important topic. What drove you to write the book?
Well, it was really the way I coped. And let me just say, first of all, thank you, Lori, for the very generous introduction. I was caring for patients. I was doing telehealth. In fact, when COVID broke, I was in Palestine, and patients in Palestine were coming down with COVID before the U.S. In fact, a Korean church group had visited, and they closed down Bethlehem. And I was in Nablus, a town about a 2-hour drive away, and it was just a matter before it hit where I was staying. And they closed the school, but I was able to get special permission to continue to go to the university and help them with a report that I was writing. But as they started canceling classes, or rather canceling planes, I realized I better get back. Otherwise, I wasn't going to get back into the U.S. easily. And I went through New York the day before they closed New York, and I would have been standing in line for 8 hours. So it was interesting to see another culture deal with it and then continue to work virtually with them. And I quarantined when I got back and then started doing telehealth, and quickly realized what a difficult thing we were asking people to do. You know, the U.S., we're not used to wearing masks, and the social isolation, I think, was difficult for a lot of people. But the clincher was when my mom and my sister came down with COVID, and then I needed to, writing is how I cope. And so that's really what gave me the idea to write the book.
Okay. Can you give us a little bit of background about your mom and your sister? You know, I had mentioned that in your intro that they were living in community, but can you tell us like what types of communities they were living in? Because I can't tell you how many personal friends I had with their own stories of dealing with this and how it affected not only their loved one but the whole family. And then the loss with many of them, lost their loved ones during this time and not being able to, grieve the way we've always known how to.
Right. Absolutely. So just let me add, I was an English major way back when, and had to start keeping a journal when I was in a creative writing class in high school. So writing is something I've always done. And the book kind of idea was born as I, tried to connect with my mom and my sister. My sister is Down syndrome. She was the second Down syndrome in my family. I was the oldest, and we had 6 kids. And after she had a hospitalization in which she was very sick, she was admitted to the nursing home and was on hospice, but then graduated from hospice. She was no longer able to be in her group home facility. And my parents wanted to keep her there because they had moved into an assisted living cottage, and my dad would go visit her in the morning and my mom would visit her in the afternoon. My dad passed when he was 92, and as my mom's health failed, she was not able to visit Fran as much, and so we were worried that that was a good place for her. Then my mom fell and broke her shoulder, and this is a common story for many, particularly women. She was no longer able to be in her independent cottage and moved into assisted living. And there are, many wonderful things about nursing homes. The U.S. does it differently than in Palestine. Extended families take care of elders or differently abled. And it's, extended families are a little different there than they are here. But family would go and visit my sister, visit my mom. and fix the voicemail machine that wasn't working, or make sure Fran's laundry was done, or take her out to get her hair cut. But all that changed with COVID. We weren't going in to visit and physically do things. We had to figure out how to do it virtually. And that's on the phone, or thank God for Facebook and Skype at the time. However, if you're not digitally savvy, and my mother wasn't, and she often didn't put in her hearing aids, it got very difficult. And I know I'm not alone in that. We could go and talk through the window to my sister Fran, because she was on the first floor, but my mom was on the third floor. And so we could stand, 3 stories down, and she would be on her phone, but you couldn't really see her. And so that ability to touch or hug or read facial expressions just was gone. And these were, I think, very hard times for our family and, for lots of people around the world.
Oh, definitely. Well, and it was nice, at least they were in the same building too, even though it was harder in some ways, it was probably easier on the family in others because they were in one location with that.
Go ahead. Yeah, they were in the same complex, but, probably about three blocks apart.
Oh,
so,
okay.
And
okay.
Yeah, and so they couldn't see each other. When before COVID, my sister would wheel my Fran over to see my mom, or we even had it arranged that transportation would take Fran over to see my mom for lunch, until my mom pulled her little refrigerator down on her leg.
Oh.
So the frailties of aging, were really at play before COVID, and none of those are easy to handle. But I think with COVID, that inability to be there and really see what was going on, is really a challenge.
Oh, it is. I remember getting phone calls from people initially from our memory cafe and people that I had worked with over the years. And I remember one in particular, the poor wife, she was like hysterical. She was so beyond herself and so distraught, and she could barely talk. And she said, I don't know if I'll ever see him again, if he'll die, if I'll die, or if when we do, he'll even know me. And I mean, the things that were just spiraling in her head that she just, that was it. That it was just all consuming. And so people coped with this in so many different fashions on so many different levels, but very devastating. And none of us like to get out of our comfort zone. And this one just like flipped the pan right over and just dumped us all out and said, we're starting from scratch on this, folks. So it was just really a very interesting process to note. I do want to note, because you talked about your writing, you've written several books. So you've got the Country Doctor Revisited, Confessions of a Sin Eater, and now you've got this beautiful book, COVID Chronicles, on essential workers and how they cope. And so, plus you've got a blog that has lots of reflections. You have traveled all over the world, really, and have experienced. You're talking about Palestine in terms of how different we are, and I think that's one of the things I know for myself. I feel really privileged to be able to talk to people around the world, because boy, it really puts you in a different perspective of what we have, or even what our values and our perceptions are here compared to other parts of the world. And I've found that really fascinating too, but it's also helped me learn to cope a little bit differently. Has that had an effect on you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that ability to step outside yourself and your experience and have a different perspective is really important. And I think that was one of the things that was interesting for me during our last year with COVID was I was so frustrated with what was happening with my mom and my sister. So, for example, when my sister was not able to get a bath because the nursing home facility was trying to work out their safe bathroom, and so she got a bed bath, and it just didn't count for her, and so she was really upset about that. But on the other side, because of the, being a healthcare provider, I understood the stress that the staff were under. I had patients who were aides in nursing homes, and I knew how hard they were working, how frustrated they were, that they didn't have adequate masks and personal protective equipment or PPE early on. So even though I was really frustrated with my sister and what was happening for her, I also knew that, people cared about her, and what wasn't happening wasn't necessarily their fault, that there was so much that was just not in our control. And that ability to kind of see things from both perspectives, I think really helped me try to have the patience to cope, and give the benefit of the doubt.
Okay. One of the things that, you had mentioned is, your family in long-term care. Can you explain to us in maybe a little bit more detail, and how did that change them? Did it have an effect? I know so many people just talk about, the depression, the isolation, and what were some of the maybe symptoms in terms of change that you and family members saw, and maybe staff as well?
Yeah, so I'll talk about Fran first. So Fran was 57, and she's Down syndrome. And she is about, just so you can picture her, she's got these beautiful brown deer-like eyes and brown hair that's graying. And she's about as wide as she is tall. She's in a wheelchair, and so being in the nursing home, she, has not gotten a lot of activity. And because my mother had been unable to visit her on a regular basis since her health was failing, just before COVID, she had started going to a day activity program. And then suddenly she was, with COVID, the nursing home shut down, so she couldn't go out to activities. And she was bored to tears. And, she loved to watch TV, and way back when she was younger, she went to Montessori. And so she does basic reading and math, and she's quite industrious. And she loves to talk on the phone. She's very social. So what was interesting was to see how she coped, because when I stepped back to really watch her, she was a lesson in mindfulness and a lesson in gratitude. I would call her and I'd say, "How's your day going, Fran?" Relaxing and taking it easy. And, she was very attached to when her meals were showing up. But, she was just in the moment. And what are you working on, Fran? "Oh, I'm reading my magazines." My one sister makes sure she gets a People's Magazine every week. And she loved to watch Ellen, which was on at 4:00. You didn't want to call her when Ellen was on. And then also out of her mouth was, "Thanks for taking my call." If she called me, "You're the best sister. Thank you so much. You're my favorite sister." And so gratitude. Just a lesson in focusing on the positive, and was just really a gift in that regard. If I could be a little bit more like her with being in the moment and, being grateful, I had a lot that I learned from her, when I could slow down enough to pay attention. Now, continuing on, my mom, it was a different story. My mom was 90, and we really saw her deteriorate. She would forget to put in her hearing aids, or was afraid to ask for help because people were so busy she didn't want to bother them. And so having conversations with her became more difficult. She also had some cataracts, which were making it more difficult for her to see, so she was not able to enjoy reading like she used to, and was not technology savvy. The activities directors in the facility were willing to help her Skype, but she didn't really enjoy it that much, and so our real way to connect with her was on the phone, or to go stand 3 stories below her window and talk to her on the phone. And so I think that isolation, for a while they cut out dining, and so she was in her room, and we really saw a deterioration with her. Once she got COVID, she had a very mild case, but, seemed to get more forgetful. And she had a few falls in there. And, we would get these calls. I've lost my wallet. I've been worried about my credit card all day. Where is it? And you could send the nurse in to check with her on some things, not necessarily the credit card issue. But, it was just really very frustrating to watch. And I tried to work the system in that the state that she was in had you could get through the ombudsman, get appointed that the patient needed an essential caregiver, which would allow visits from a family member to go in and check on her. That didn't work. I kind of tried to work the system to try to make things easier for her, but it just felt like nothing worked. It was just tough.
It was tough times, and people were scrambling all over, and it seemed like there was a lot of inconsistency in how different services were working with families and with individuals. Anyways, that's what I saw. I know in Minnesota, and I heard that from people really all around the country. Even though there were guidelines established, there was still a lot of kind of flex room in terms of what that looked like.
Yeah.
How did your mom and your sister, did they recognize the differences in terms of COVID and what that meant in your life? I know you mentioned your sister, was really very, very positive and very mindful and stuff, but was it something that she talked about or acknowledged the difference, or she just stayed in that space because that's who she was or is?
Yeah, I think a lot of it was that's who she was. She stayed in the space. Mm-hmm. So she was one of the first ones to come down with COVID. So it was a big facility, and you're right, I saw other smaller facilities that were much more facile and creative in how they responded. Mm-hmm. Fran, kind of stayed in that space. We really watched my mom deteriorate and tried to do kind of a good cop, bad cop, mm-hmm. with the administration, and to see if they couldn't be a little bit more creative, and eventually decided to move her, with her permission, to a smaller facility, which was more of a memory care place, which took a totally different approach in that their patients couldn't really understand COVID. And, in reality, I don't think my mom did either, because she would say when she was in the old facility, why can't I get my hair cut? Her long gray hair was driving her nuts because usually she kept it short and colored it. And so with her permission, we moved her into this other facility that we'd gotten a referral to from kind of local folks who had some suggestions. And so because it was a memory care, their approach was, we have somebody that can come and do hair. They had kept COVID out completely, so people could move around, group dining, because the social element was really important for their clients who had more memory issues. The challenge is even though my mom had memory issues, she didn't recognize that she did. And so there were, of course, some people who were more severe than she was, and she said, I don't belong here. However, family was allowed to come in and visit her, with masks and face shields. And so it was a much kind of better environment for her. But, she then was mourning for the old place.
Mm-hmm.
So we were kind of damned if we did and damned if we didn't. Just no easy answers. I think that was part of the frustration is, I know for myself and my sisters, you were trying to do the best you could, but it wasn't good enough. And, facilities were, trying hard, but, we know that many of the long-term care really turned into many different fatalities. And, I think the good news was that often if during the final days, family was allowed to come in and be with their loved one, with hospice. But in some places you couldn't do that. You were saying goodbye, over the phone or over Zoom. And I know that was one of in the book, I interviewed an ICU physician, and she kind of compared pre-COVID and during COVID in the ICU. And she said with COVID, the patients were younger, 40s, 50s. The year before, they were much older, and people were much sicker. And she didn't have the families there to bond with in COVID. And so her main communication with families was over, FaceTime or Zoom. And she was suddenly giving them difficult information, and they would second guess her or not understand because they were not there, day in and day out to see in front of their own eyes how their loved one was, not doing well or deteriorating. And that kind of pressure on the ICU team to suddenly become the communicator of difficult information to families that they tried to build trust with over the phone, but, it just wasn't the same, and the challenge of that. So, a very difficult time, I think, for everyone.
Yeah, never easy. And, especially when you're short-staffed, you're in a crisis, you're overworked, and now you're adding more stuff to what it is you're supposed to do in terms of just trying to be efficient and caring, and yet not only does it affect your work life, but then your home life has this huge impact too with all you're doing and stuff. I don't know how the essential workers really even maintained their mental health. It was like every aspect, every breath was almost being pulled from them. Someone else needed something else from them. And I just think they're all incredible.
Yeah. And I think that's why I wrote the book, because I wanted to understand that. I was struggling with my own coping. And, one of the things I found was humor. This particular ICU physician said to me, we couldn't be sad and overwhelmed all the time. And so we would, there was one particular physician that was on their team who became the prankster. And one night, Anna was the physician I interviewed. She was paged to call Wendy. She was paged to call Dr. Berger, and at a phone number. And so when she called the number, it was Wendy's, and she said, "I'm calling for Dr. Berger," and of course the staff person at Wendy's said, this is Wendy's restaurant. You know, and then Anna knew the prankster hit. I kind of ruined that joke a bit, but sorry about that. Anyway, so the prankster would do these kind of silly things and make everybody laugh. And Anna talked a little bit about a new person joining the team because new residents come on, periodically, and took her aside at one point and said, everybody's really pretty flippant here. Given the fact of the seriousness of which we're, we're dealing with people's lives here and how sick. And Anna explained, we just can't be sad all the time. We find ourselves laughing at, whatever my dog did or my partner did, and it's kind of how we cope. And she said that this new addition to the team came back a couple of weeks later with a cartoon that played out that exact scenario. So kind of understanding that humor was an important release for her and the team, to show up and do what you needed to do every day.
Well, I think humor is so important on so many levels, and yet when we're in crisis, it seems so often it's the first thing we give up. And yet it kind of centers us, brings us back to balance, re-energizes us, and just kind of lightens the load. When you can share a smile or a laugh with somebody, I just think it's such a critical piece of life, and I think it's a really valuable piece of how we care for ourselves and for others. And that's why I'm so glad you brought that up, because I just think that that's an undervalued high asset that sometimes is overlooked.
I would agree. And, we know from science that good endorphins, good brain chemicals are released when we laugh. So, on a chemical level, the school nurse that I interviewed, Susan, also had the gift of laughter, and she was a really funny storyteller. And I asked her, I said, so, where did your laughter come from? It's clearly a way of coping for you. And she said, well, I was a theater major. And I also came from a family who were jokesters, so it's just in my blood. It's my go-to when things get tough. So again, underlining, the value of not taking ourselves too seriously.
Yep. I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally
the
agree.
Others, some of my other essential workers, a few, talked about prayer and really the importance of their belief and their faith, and that, they were not alone. Their God, however they defined their God, was with them and gave them strength. And Dr. Jackie had an 80-year-old grandmother, and Dr. Jackie was in the South. And when she got overwhelmed because she was in the rural South, and so they were pretty staffed fairly thin, and she was working very hard. She'd call Grandma, and Grandma was well into her 80s, and she couldn't see Grandma because she didn't want to expose Grandma to anything. And this is before our vaccines. And Grandma would just remind her to look at her Bible, and, God's with you. God's holding you in your hand. And so, it was a good reminder that prayer is an important coping for many people as well. And one of the things that she told me, being from the South, is that, you just were expected to talk about faith with patients, that was an important coping element for her patients as well.
I hear that all the time on how important that is. And again, sometimes it's a situation that people avoid. Do you find that in hospital settings and clinical settings?
Yeah, I think particularly in the U.S., we are, we don't mix church and state supposedly, and that, I always don't want to be judgmental about, patients' beliefs. And so sometimes we go overboard. I'm teaching first-year doctoring and to the medical students this past year at Brown. We finished it, and they spent a session on spirituality and how you talk to about spirituality with patients. So that may be changing. And of course, when I was in Palestine, this was a very Muslim, Islam oriented part of the country, and the call to prayers went off 5 times a day. And often the people I were meeting with would say, I've got to go pray for 5 minutes, and that was very much part of that culture. And so other places, can do it differently. But I think I find with patients, I check in, and if faith is part of their life, then helping them, reminding them to draw on that strength is important during difficult times.
I think that that's a beautiful thing that you incorporate that in, because I think that helps so many people. And and if it's not, then you move on to the next thing. But it can settle people down and just make them feel appreciated and valued, if you accept whatever religion they choose, whatever gives them comfort. And we've gotten to a state here in the U.S. where with many things, everything's so divided. People are afraid to even let people know many different things about their life, which to me is really very, very sad, because then we can't be authentic human beings. We can't be truly compassionate beings if we're not allowed in to know the true story of who somebody is. And to me, that's all part of the packaging of living well, feeling balanced, feeling purposeful and accepted. I mean, there's just so many levels to all of that. So kudos to you for working that in and educating, the new doctors regarding that. Very, very important. Very, very important.
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the privileges of being a physician is this opportunity to sit on the sidelines of people's lives, as a coach or a helper or just as an observer sometimes, and, cheer them on through the best and the worst of times. And, I see how people cope and how people don't cope. And one of the things that I think was clear during this last year with COVID is that people either figured out how to manage or thrive or didn't. And, burnout became worse, depression was worse. And then, of course, we know of, some people took their own lives. There was a ER physician in New York who just couldn't set limits. And, someone young and bright who committed suicide. So I think those are reminders that self-care is really important, that even though we feel like we are indispensable, we've got to take care of ourselves. And I heard that from some of the folks I interviewed as well, that one of the gifts or the silver lining in this time was that they had to pay more attention to self-care. Otherwise, they just couldn't do what they had to do.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think for even the general public, being forced to slow down has been eye-opening on how psychotic we've gotten with being busy, overly busy. I think a lot of people have taken that in and go, wow, I can breathe now. I know what it's like to relax, because so often you would hear people say, even when they went on vacation, it took me 2 to 3 days to unwind, and I got 2 days in out of my 7-day vacation, because then I started winding back up because I knew there was going to be a pile of stuff when I came back. So right. I think COVID has really gotten everyone to look at the importance of balance, the importance of relationship. I know that I saw, and I'd like to hear if you saw this too, but a lot more families stepping up and stepping in that maybe weren't so active before when they had a loved one in a community. And so staff were saying, well, where'd these guys come from? They're coming out of the woodwork now, you know, and now we can't let them in. But I think people appreciate so much more what an essential worker does, if it's a hospital, if it's a clinic, if it's a teacher. You know, I mean, there's so many levels. If it's in the grocery store, a truck driver, whatever, everybody now looks, I think, differently. And hopefully going forward won't take everybody for granted, I think, like we have in the past, but be more appreciative that no matter who we are at whatever level, we have a gift that we're giving the world, if it's paid for or not, in terms of our presence and what we do and how we do it. And you know, I've seen a lot more people say, you know, I want to volunteer. A lot of people, you know, started delivering meals or writing letters to people in communities, or I mean, there were so many different levels that people could volunteer, and yet so many where they couldn't because it was shut down, and some of it had to do with they just couldn't even manage the volunteers with being in crisis with COVID. But I'm hoping that some of that will be positive changes, you know, moving forward, that we've learned some lessons from all of this in terms of balance to everyone and not being so one-sided when we look at a problem, but really looking at it from a greater scope of how is everyone impacted. Do you feel that change is coming, or maybe it's here?
You know, I think, I think, you know, hope is important. And that, you know, one of my favorite quotes is that change is a given, growth is optional. And, you know, not only did we have COVID, but we also had, you know, high tensions with the George Floyd and kind of the birth of the Black Lives Matter. I just talked to some of my colleagues in Palestine, and they're, you know, facing some very difficult times, but have seen some bridges that are happening despite the difficulty. And, you know, I think that, you know, you've got to keep putting one foot in front of the other and find out why. You know, one of my medical assistants, essential workers, Marcella, you know, the thing that kept her going was her family. And, you know, that was kind of the jewel for her. You know, for somebody else, it was getting outside that kept them going and helped them to, you know, rejuvenate and feel ready to, you know, put one foot forward. And so I think the message is that, you know, you come through difficult times and, you know, figure out your way to move forward, and that the fact that you've done that is something to celebrate. And some of that is even thriving. That, you know, doors close, but other doors open. And if you pay attention, you know, other opportunities come. That you don't expect. You know, I heard that, you know, one physician decided to finally do the additional training that she needed to specialize in obesity. She was very frustrated because she's from Honduras. Her parents had come from Honduras, and the Spanish-speaking community in her city was hit very hard by COVID. And, you know, she was really frustrated and exhausted, but she realized that by doing some additional training in obesity, because she had the time, because she was home more, you know, because her kids were homeschooling, that, you know, that was the silver lining for her. So it was really, you know, good for my heart to hear how people found their ways forward.
Oh, sweet. I wanted to ask you, you know, you have so many different stories in your book in terms of how people are affected. Was there one that just really stood out to you and go, wow, this really has some beautiful lessons in this that I didn't recognized before?
So I think one was Dr. Irene, and she was a physician that works in the San Diego, very near the border, and her medical assistant lives in Mexico because her husband, the medical assistant's husband, was deported, and so in order to live as a family, and of course it's cheaper, they live in Mexico, and her medical assistant crosses the border every day. And when her medical assistant came down with COVID, of course she was in Mexico, and Dr. Irene was very worried about her. And they would text each other, and she had said, if things take a turn for the worse, you call me, I'll meet you at the border, and I will make sure that you are in the hospital here. And so their kind of commitment to each other, the medical assistant did get better and made it back, or came back to work, but she started back, it was her son's birthday that she started back to work. And so, what kind of what was happening between them was really caring for each other as a work team. Dr. Irene had her medical assistant's, best heart, in her heart, and the medical assistant felt like it was really important to be there for Irene, to take care of the patients in the clinic. And so that genuine commitment to being there for each other was, really beautiful to see. And I go into a little bit more detail about, how they supported each other. But, that commitment and caring was so important.
Oops. My mic, I had it turned off, and it didn't want to go back on there for a second. Well, that is wonderful, and I do think, COVID brought us closer, made us appreciate each other. But it really is touching when you see somebody kind of really go out of their way to give someone else comfort, no matter how big or small that is. It's just powerful to see that level of compassion and humanity come into play in large and small numbers, all over the world. I like I said, as much as it's kind of like dementia, I wouldn't wish it on anybody, but boy, if you step into this space, there's some big blessings wrapped in a really, really weird package. I kind of think COVID is the same way.
Yeah.
That there, but you're only going to find what you're looking for too. And if all you want to focus on is the doom and gloom, it'll be there for you. But if you want to learn some, and feel some beauty, and learn some beautiful lessons from others, and maybe even change your own way of life and how you interact with people, those things are there too. And they allow us also to get creative in terms of, businesses. How are we going to serve? How do we need to serve? How do we need to not just make money, but how do we make this sustainable for our clients, for our staff, and for ourselves? This, to me, it really was a kind of a step back in terms of and looking hard at, what, none of us are going to make this if we don't do this together.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
And I think some of the essential workers that I talked to, felt really cared for. And we're told to stay home. We don't want to see you if you're sick. And then I had somebody else who said, well, you were exposed. You're not feeling sick. Come on in. And this particular Jasmine was worried that she was going to expose. She worked in a group home, and she was worried that she was going to expose the clients. If she had picked up COVID from her mother, who happened to be a nurse's aide, who got sick in a nursing home. So, I think we saw examples, as you're saying, of genuine, caring and concern, and look, we're in this together. And then a lack of that. And maybe some opportunities, we look at the domestic violence agencies, and they were busier than ever. So, that living close in situations that aren't healthy, had, played out in not good ways. But, sometimes when the stakes are bad, it gives people opportunity to say, is this what I signed up for? Is there another way to think about this? If this is the way the job is going to treat me, if I have another opportunity, maybe I should look. And so some of these situations, I don't think anybody would wish COVID on anybody, or as you said, wish dementia on anybody. But, there are gifts. And, I'm not being Pollyanna, or these are not platitudes. This is, you kind of, through the grit, you put one foot in front of the other, and you figure out what it takes to, to make lemons into lemonade.
Yeah. Yeah, one of the things I always say to myself when I get myself in a pickle, or when I'm feeling out of control, which a lot of people did during COVID, is I kind of have a talk with God and the universe, and I'm like, what's the lesson here? I really don't think it was to put me through hell and back. I think you're supposed to be teaching me something. So what is it I am supposed to learn from this? And what I found by just asking myself that simple question was that I focused on an actual answer that could enhance things instead of just spinning in the minutia of the doom and the gloom and the worry. And not that stuff's not valid. I'm not saying that, folks, at all. But I'm saying that we can have more control over our thought patterns, our beliefs, and our actions if we want to. But in order to do that, sometimes we have to step out of even what our immediate family and friends are thinking and talking about, and kind of rescue ourselves and look at the world, in a bigger vision of, wow. I mean, look at what's happened with mental health. People have really taken notice of that now, and says, man, we have to serve people very differently than what we have. How long is it going to take us to get a model that really works? Probably a few years, but at least the conversation has come out of the closet, and people are seeing how that has affected people in so many different ways. Therese, I just so appreciate your time today. We're down to a little over 2 minutes already. And so I want to make sure that we get people your contact information. And so people can go to your website, which is ThereseZink.com. That's THERESE, and then Zink, ZINK.com. Or you can email her by just going to her website and go to the About page and scroll down towards the bottom there, and there's a contact form, which is really easy to do. And, you go to her site, it's really easy to find the book and to be able to go ahead and order that from there. But you're just such a valued resource, and I appreciate you taking the time to really look at this picture from such a wide angle, because I really do think that that's so important. And I love how this is about our essential workers. I mean, we need to help them cope because we're nothing without them. That's the bottom line. I mean, they're the ones that have really pulled us through this crisis, as much as we all like to think that we're in control. And we have to appreciate one another and listen to their stories. Anything you want to add? We've got about 40 seconds left.
Yeah. Well, you are so gracious. Thank you. And I would say, it was those essential workers who were the ones that were helping my mom and my sister, when they needed to go to the bathroom, when they were, confused, and that, their caring was really important to me. So, thank you for your caring and all the good work you're doing, Lori.
Wonderful.
A pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, it was nice to have you on the show and to catch up. And, I always look forward to what you're doing next, because you are not one that slows down and just watches life go by. You are an active role model for all of us. So thank you. And for you all, you can always reach out to me at alzheimerspeaks.com. Take care, everybody. Love ya. Talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Hi, everyone. This is Meredith from the Senior Fitness with Meredith podcast, where I discuss all things for seniors, from fitness, your health and wellness journeys, how to be all over strong and beyond. I also have my mini podcast called Motivation with Meredith. It's a great, quick motivational pick-me-up for your days. Join me, listen now, search for Senior Fitness with Meredith on your favorite podcast platform.